Imagine standing at the absolute pinnacle of the tech world, a man trusted by the giants of Silicon Valley to guard the digital lives of millions. You are not just a security expert, you are a former federal prosecutor, a man who once spent his days putting cybercriminals behind bars. But then, on a quiet night in 2016, a single email arrives that forces a choice. In that moment, do you follow the law you once swore to uphold, or do you protect the image of a multi-billion-dollar empire? For Joseph Sullivan, the chief security officer of Uber, that choice didn't just end his career, it changed the legal landscape of the entire internet forever. This is not a simple story of a fall from grace. It is a clinical look at how the culture of growth at all costs turned a hunter of hackers into a man convicted of a federal felony for helping them. Before the scandal, Joseph Sullivan was the gold standard for corporate security. His resume was a masterpiece of institutional trust. He had served as a federal prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office, specializing in high-tech crimes. He then moved to Facebook during its most explosive growth years, becoming its first head of security. By the time he joined Uber in 2015, he was regarded as a pioneer, the man who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because he was the one who built the vaults. Uber, at the time, was a company defined by its aggression. Under the leadership of its co-founder, Travis Kalanick, the ride-sharing giant was famous for its hustle, its willingness to ignore regulations, and its combative relationship with authorities. Sullivan was brought in to provide a sense of adult supervision and professional shielding for a company that was frequently in the crosshairs of regulators. The ticking time bomb began in late 2016. While Uber was already under investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, for a previous data breach, Sullivan received an email from an anonymous source. The message was blunt. Hackers had bypassed Uber security, accessed a private GitHub repository, and stolen the personal information of 57 million users and 600,000 driver's license numbers. For any company, this is a catastrophe. For a company already being audited by the FTC for security failures, it was an extinction-level event for their reputation. The hackers demanded a six-figure ransom to delete the data and stay quiet. This is where the story veers away from standard corporate crisis management and into the territory of a high-stakes cover-up. Rather than reporting the breach to the authorities or the FTC, as the law and corporate ethics would dictate, Sullivan and his team treated the intrusion not as a crime, but as a transaction. They decided to funnel the payment through Uber's bug bounty program. These programs are common in tech. Companies pay ethical hackers small rewards for finding and reporting vulnerabilities so they can be fixed. However, bug bounties are meant for white-hat hackers who find a hole in the fence, not for black-hat criminals who have already broken into the house and stolen the jewelry. Sullivan's team arranged a $100,000 payment in Bitcoin to the hackers, but there was a catch. To receive the money, the hackers had to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, that contained a blatant lie. They had to state that they had not actually taken any data. Sullivan personally oversaw the process, ensuring the payment was processed through a system designed for legitimate security researchers. By doing this, the massive breach was effectively wiped from the official record. It didn't exist in the eyes of the public, the drivers, or the federal regulators who were at that very moment asking Sullivan's department if Uber had any new security issues to report. For a year, the secret held. Sullivan remained a respected figure, and Uber continued its global expansion. But the culture of a company can only stay aggressive for so long before it hits a wall. In 2017, Travis Kalanick was forced out as CEO following a series of unrelated scandals, and Dara Khosrowshahi took the helm. The new leadership ordered an investigation into the security department's practices. When the legal team and the new CEO discovered the 2016 breach, and the subsequent $100,000 bounty payment, the fallout was instantaneous. Sullivan was fired, and the breach was finally disclosed to the public nearly a year after it occurred. The story could have ended with a high-profile firing and a massive fine for Uber, which the company eventually paid $148 million to settle with 50 states. But the Department of Justice took a different view. They saw Sullivan's actions not just as a corporate mistake, but as a criminal act of obstruction. In 2020, the U.S. government took the unprecedented step of charging Sullivan personally with felony obstruction of justice and misprision of a felony, a rare charge that essentially means knowing a crime was committed and taking active steps to conceal it. The trial of Joseph Sullivan in 2022 became a landmark event for the tech industry. It was the first time an executive had been criminally prosecuted for how they handled a data breach. The prosecution's argument was surgical. Sullivan, a former prosecutor himself, knew exactly what the law required. He knew that the FTC was actively investigating Uber, and he chose to hide the truth to protect the company's valuation and his own standing. They argued that by making the hackers sign NDAs that lied about the data theft, he was actively tampering with evidence. Sullivan's defense was built on the idea that he was a scapegoat. They argued that he was following the chaotic corporate culture of Uber, that his superiors, including Kalanick, were aware of the payment, and that he truly believed the bug bounty program was a valid way to handle the situation. They tried to paint him as a man making a split-second decision in a war room environment, trying to ensure the hackers deleted the data to protect users. The jury didn't buy it. In October 2022, Sullivan was found guilty on both counts. The verdict sent a shockwave through the Silicon Valley ecosystem. For decades, Chief Information Security Officers, or CISOs, had operated in the background, often treated as the fall guys for technical failures, but rarely held legally responsible for corporate strategy. Now the precedent was set. If you hide a crime to protect your brand, you can go to prison. However, the story ends with a nuanced twist. Despite the gravity of the conviction, the judge in the case, William Orrick, recognized the complexity of the situation. At his sentencing in 2023, Sullivan was spared prison time and sentenced to 3 years of probation and a fine. The judge noted that while Sullivan's actions were criminal, his intentions weren't necessarily rooted in personal greed, but rather a misguided loyalty to a toxic corporate culture. The legacy of Joseph Sullivan is now taught in law schools and cybersecurity seminars worldwide. It serves as a haunting reminder of the gray zone in tech ethics. It proved that in the digital age, a cover-up is often far more dangerous than the original crime. Sullivan went from being the man who caught hackers to the man whose name is synonymous with the legal perils of corporate secrecy. He didn't just lose his job, he lost his reputation as the guardian of the internet, becoming a cautionary tale for every executive who thinks they can outmaneuver the truth with a Bitcoin wallet and an NDA.